Hello again. In case you're just joining us, I'm Tracy Fisher, Chair of BDI. Welcome to MedWeek. I hope you enjoyed this morning's speakers. I know I did. And I would like to take the opportunity to personally congratulate our award winners. We are so proud to be able to honor these outstanding people and organizations. It's now time for us to sit back and get inspired by our keynote speaker, Stephen Green. Stephen is an economist, speaker, startup advisor, and recovering venture capitalist. He has spent his career helping founders start, grow, and prosper. You can find a TEDx talk where Stephen encourages us all to cheat more. It's right on point, and I encourage you to look it up. His tireless advocacy for Black and Latinx founders has landed him on stages across the country, speaking about the power of entrepreneurship. And today, he's on the MedWeek stage. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Green.
To start things off, I want to say thank you to the Business Diversity Institute and the organizers of this amazing event. I'm honored to be part of the great work that you all have been doing for the years. Now to the elephant in the virtual room. Who is this guy? I'm Stephen Green, a Portland area native. I'm also an economist, which means I'm good enough with numbers to be dangerous, but not quite good enough to be a mathematician. My career, money, and free time is spent supporting small businesses like yours. As a recovering banker who's also been a founder, I have a unique perspective on small business. whether it's underwriting over 1,000 business loans to mainly Black and Latinx founders across the region over the last years, or serving on numerous business boards and commissions, I know the plight of being a founder and the barriers that you all face. Entrepreneurship for me started early in college. I financed my entire senior year with an online shoe store selling Nikes. I later co-founded a brew pub and brewery in Northeast Portland that's been open almost 10 years. By day now, I run a Black-owned media company. We've raised over $8 million and we have almost 30 employees. Not too shabby for a couple SEI kids. When I'm not working or spending time with my family, I'm thinking of ways to support our amazing small businesses in Portland, like my event, Pitch Black. We bring people together in cities across the country and introduce them to amazing Black founders that are already in their midst. I think it's safe to say, you're my people. Man, it's been a crazy last 18 months. COVID shut down that saw thousands of businesses around the state shutter for good. Social justice reckoning that wasn't locally, and we got really good at this thing called Zoom. I chair a nonprofit called Built Oregon, and over the last 18 months, we did surveys and interviews with thousands of small business owners, from Beaverton to Burns, Astoria to Ashland. Folks all shared similar things. They were stressed, confused, even hurt. For the businesses that weren't negatively impacted financially, they still struggled with the pandemic. They were concerned about the uncertain road ahead for their business, the safety of their employees, and in a few unfortunate cases, they were struggling with how to move forward after losing a perfect person to COVID. POC founders seem to almost instantaneously be impacted by the pandemic, with a number of them closing immediately in March 2020, less than a month after the shutdown. As the public sector went into action and tried to help, it was POC small businesses who seemed to be always out of the loop. I believe part of this is due to the fact that these communities never really had strong relationships in the public sector, and a historical lack of trust that was never addressed. As I prepared to put together my talk, I went through my normal motions. I grabbed articles to be able to cite, spreadsheets to share. Like, I love spreadsheets. I knew I was a bit rusty, but nothing felt right. I've done a TED Talk in front of 5,000 people, but this talk made me way more nervous. So I sought assistance from the person most familiar with stress in my life, my 15-year-old daughter. Everything seems to be a DEFCON 1 situation for teenagers. We chatted and she diagnosed things pretty quickly, concluding that I was nervous because you all are like a mirror to me and what I've been through over the last 18 months. In order to connect with you authentically, it would mean that I'd have to face many of these thoughts and feelings myself, and many of them for the first time. The answer: ditch the speech, do a family discussion. No slides, fancy pictures, just be present and authentic. So here goes. I'm going to cover 4 things that I hope will empower you, mixed with some tactical points that I hope will move your business or even idea forward. I will let you know what I've learned to be the hardest thing about business. Second, I'll talk about the only thing that grows over time. Third, the proper definition of D2C. And lastly, why cheating may be the secret to helping small businesses grow. First, let's talk about the reality of the landscape that we find ourselves in today. New census data shows that Oregon is home to more minority-owned businesses than ever before, and we're all over the state. I saw this for myself last summer, being part of getting the word out for the Oregon Cares Fund, a $62 million fund put together by volunteers to support Oregonians impacted by COVID. We ended up funding more than 600 businesses around the state. I took multiple road trips and I found myself at a Black History Museum in Eastern Oregon, medical hardware company in Lake Oswego, and even walking amongst the trees at a fifth generation Black-owned hazelnut farm in Junction City. The number of Black-owned businesses has increased threefold in the last 6 years, with the state being home to more than 6,000 Black-owned firms. Our growth, though, is juxtaposed with some sobering realities. More than 70% of Black businesses in Oregon don't have a website. Resources for our businesses are still hard to come by. And in the case of access to capital, has all but disappeared. The Portland Business Journal has been reporting for the last 5 years on the shrinking number of loans to Black businesses around the state, noting that the number of businesses getting financed has been steadily decreasing, to the fact that what they found was 93% of the loans had decreased in the last 10 years. Crazy. Now, I don't have to tell you all that how frustrating and hard it was to try and get approved for a PPP loan as well. Luckily, though, there was some things to be changing for the better as well. Corporate pledges that gave promise to support the community, Black Lives Matter signs all over our city, and even blacked out social media pages. We got a glimpse of a future Portland where we were valued instead of just tolerated. We got seats at tables we hadn't been at before, and we were able to give firsthand accounts of how programs and processes impacted us. We dispelled myths like a rising tide lifts all boats, and that our businesses are only located in Northeast Portland. We finally had a way to help Portland understand that we all benefit when we do right by communities of color. Since the momentum has slowed, the meetings have stopped, and the reality has set in, no one's going to save us. But that's never stopped us before. Entrepreneurship is hard. I often say being an entrepreneur means you navigate a special place where you're smart enough to know something's a good idea, but not quite smart enough to say no. The job at Nike or Intel is so much easier. You get paychecks on the regular, you have insurance, and you even get to experience this thing called weekends. Being a boss isn't as glamorous as it seems in Fast Company or Inc. magazine. Most of us will never be ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange or have our journey chronicled in the How I Built This podcast. I think rapper Puff Daddy had his realization when he followed up his 1996 hit, All About the Benjamins, that lauded the single-minded goal of getting money with his 1997 hit featuring Notorious B.I.G., Mo money, mo problems. Life comes at you quick, Puffy. My dad would tell my brothers and I that there's two kinds of people in this world, those that sign the front of the check and those that sign the back. He and my mom were both small business owners. They left corporate jobs to place bets on themselves and start something of their own. My dad had a HR company that specialized in helping tech companies get top-notch talent to come to Oregon. My mom had a startup in the 90s where she and her team had this crazy idea about getting people and companies to use this new thing called the World Wide Web to get to sign up for health insurance. I saw them both work extremely hard through good times and bad. And I now, after advising and investing in a number of businesses over the years, I've learned that starting is actually the hardest thing to do. I wish everyone could experience the satisfaction, even if only briefly, that you get that, go from coming up with an idea at your kitchen table and then finding out that complete strangers are willing to give you their hard-earned money for what you came up with. Ask yourself, are you ready to get started? If you have started, how can you help another person of color get started with their business? I'm watching an interview a few years ago with the actor James Earl Jones, and he said, there's only one thing in this world that gets bigger over time. Everything else dissipates, and that's a story. He was right. Stories are the things that help us accomplish amazing stuff, but they're also the things that we tell ourselves that hold us back the most. We tell the stories, who tells the stories of founders of color in Portland? Where can the 15-year-old version of you go to be inspired and hear about a local contractor or architect? This quote is what moved me to start Pitch Black 6 years ago. I realized I was surrounded by these amazing entrepreneurs that our city wasn't embracing because they just didn't know their stories. What started as a one-time celebration of 8 small businesses evolved into an organization that's telling new stories around Black entrepreneurship all over the country in places like Seattle, Austin, and Philadelphia. Here in Portland, we've had 5 events, and those 5 events, we've had over 1,000 attendees, and we've given away over $70,000 in prize money. The 48 people that have walked on stage have gone on to start dozens of companies. They've raised over $50 million in venture capital. And maybe most importantly, they're telling our next generation new stories about what it means to be a Black entrepreneur here in Portland. Our stories matter now more than they ever had, as our communities continue to struggle with the impacts of climate change, gun violence, and our flawed community education system. What are the stories that you want to put out into the world? Also, maybe just as important, what are the stories you're telling yourself? I run a D2C business, direct to consumer, but we're learning we probably have the C wrong. In actuality, it should be community. This has been in the works for a long time in America. The annual General Social Survey cited before COVID even started that Americans were spending the least amount of time with their neighbors since the Great Depression. How can we build trust and heal from trauma in our communities if we don't even know our neighbors' names? If community had a KPI or a key performance indicator, it'd be trust. What are some brands that you trust with your money, your health, your loved ones? When I decided to leave working at the city after 7 years, it was because I could feel I was losing trust with my community, that I couldn't look someone in the eyes as I used to before inside the Safeway on MLK talking about a current project. I just didn't have that passion like I used to. A small business should always be thinking about where it stands with its community, because at the end of the day, you'll never beat Amazon on price or compete with Walmart on the number of locations. Your competitive advantage is that people trust you inside of your community. For the public sector folks, think about where small businesses have community in Portland right now. Did you know we're the largest city in the country to not have a one-stop shop for small business owners to be able to ask questions and get connected with resources? We're like an amazing airport of resource runways where we don't have an air traffic controller. That needs to change. And right now, there's far too many small business owners finding themselves in the wrong runway, asking themselves the wrong questions, and it crushes their confidence. Let's make sure to build that air traffic control tower so that founders and would-be founders spend less time being lost and more time being supported by community. How are you cultivating trusted relationships with your business? Who is your community? We live in a seemingly binary world, good or evil, blue or red, voodoo or pips, donuts. The business equivalent is Amazon or your local mom and pop shop. My late friend Neil helped me understand the key to getting past this conundrum. You need to learn to cheat. Now hear me out. Neil was a bodybuilder. He treated his body like a temple leading up to a show, and occasionally he had a planned cheat day where he would deviate from his normal strict diet and have the biggest meal you could imagine: pancakes, pizza, burgers, the works. It gave him a break from the all or nothing mindset of accomplishing his goal. In a small business context, it's about getting incremental buy-in to support small businesses. Instead of shaming folks for shopping in Amazon, small businesses could collaborate together on having Amazon cheat days, where folks around the city replace their Amazon purchase with one from a local business every Wednesday. This can be particularly helpful for our public sector partners who want to support small businesses, but their procurement policies make large-scale change difficult and lengthy in time. Incremental steps also means more opportunities to build trust with the communities where you have the least amount of trust. This is going to be where I give you the only homework of the day. If you're a business, plan out how a cheat day may help you and who you would partner with over time. If you're one of the small business advocates or public partners, draft up how you can cheat on some of the big companies that you spend your money with each month. Make a budget and show how spending on cheating can be helpful for the small businesses here in town. As I leave, I want you to know small business community is Portland's secret sauce. It's literally in the ground that we walk on. The indigenous tribes of the area were known to be amazing traders and were able to travel great distances because of their ability to engage with other cultures and communities. I think that carried on to the people who traveled on the wagon trains in the middle of the 19th century. Everyone taking the Oregon Trail west came to a point at the Snake River where you could choose to go south to California to try and get rich in the gold rush, or you took the tougher route, continuing west on the Oregon Trail for the chance of building something with community. As we see from today and yesterday's programming, the Portland of now is still a place focused on community, and small is at the center of that. Think about it. Where do we take our selfies, share the best donuts, and have our most important moments with the people that we love? It's with you all. So it's vital that you make it through the hardest part, starting your business, then moving through all the ups and downs. Know that when you do that, you're writing new stories for the folks that'll come after you, as they will ultimately get to the point of asking themselves, why me? Your journey is never a solo one. Never forget you'll need the community to help you get to where you want to go with business. Learn to cheat to bring on new partners and customers. 99% of the time, they want to see you win. They just don't know how to go about it. I'm an economist, and I've looked at all the data, I've consulted my spreadsheets, and they all say that a prosperous Portland future relies on how big we can go small. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Hey everyone, happy to be here today. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited to see where the conversation goes from here and to see what questions everyone has. So I believe I'm going to get joined on the stage as we get into the question portion. Yay!
Hi, Stephen.
Hey there, how are we doing today?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm doing good. My roofer decided to show up right now to start work on our roof, so it's a little loud. But...
I feel like that's happened to me so many times in this virtual world. It's like the neighbor across the street decides to cut down their tree, and I first I got to start by saying that I love that you're talking about telling your story. And then we need to think about the stories we tell ourselves too, because I like to tell a lot of stories. So if you have a second, I want to share with you my story that I was reflecting on related to what you were just talking about. So I love when anybody from Oregon brings up the Oregon Trail, especially I'm guessing you're kid 80s, 90s like me, right? Like who didn't play the Oregon Trail game, right?
Yes.
And so I live actually down in the valley, south of Salem, and actually what is called Millersburg. So I love to tell this story that it sounds really way more interesting, like an old English or an old British mystery show that I live in a burg. But it is so not. It's quite boring. But the coolest thing about where I live is I live right across the street from one of the oldest cemeteries in the state. And we actually have some of the original Oregon pioneers buried there. And so it's just this little tiny old cemetery. It's pretty cool. So when you were talking about that, that's what I was reflecting on. And then so when the big windstorm came through, we had all of those trees go down with the heavy ice and the wind and rain and all those things. And so, as I'd be trying to have these virtual meetings, people are coming and chopping down these trees and it's just getting really inconvenient. But then I was like, it's kind of the sound of small business is what I started thinking about. It's like, who was there to rescue us in these communities, especially like mine, but our small locally owned tree cutter businesses. So and like you said, I keep looking at that cemetery every day, and I'm like, Oregon is full of the biggest, most courageous souls on earth. So of course it would be an entrepreneur state because they made it all the way to the end. Like literally they went and were like, well, I think the ocean keeps going, so we better stop here. So I love that you tie that all together. And I couldn't agree with you more that Oregon is definitely based on small businesses. And that really is such an important aspect of who we all are. So I'm going to read you a couple questions that we have.
Awesome.
You ready?
Can't wait. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What is your favorite cheat that led you to cheating more?
Gotcha. As I think about cheating, I think about my career in finance, and I think about like the big deals that I've done, right? And when you look on a spreadsheet, the big deals are the ones with the most zeros. But as I reflect on my career, the big deals are ones that oftentimes had the smallest numbers. And so, I oftentimes say that the biggest deal that I ever did was a $40,000 loan to a contractor who was homeless at the time that we did the loan. And I got together with the president of our bank, and we both kind of just put our names on the line to do this really, really small deal to help this contractor work on one floor of a building. That was the difference between him living in his van in Las Vegas and him being able to move back to his homeland of Portland and build his business. And so in that case, cheating was going from the big general contractor that could have done all the floors really, really quickly versus taking one floor of a 50 plus story building and allowing this contractor to go and shoot their shot. And he shot his shot and did an amazing job, and then ultimately ended up completing the rest of the building himself with his small crew. And so when I think about cheating, it's the impact on small folks like that really sit with me, and that's almost 20 years ago, and I remember it like yesterday.
That is so inspirational, and just everything that we're here today to celebrate and to be about and to hopefully grow and encourage. So myself and others on BDI's board in particular, and I'm sure plenty of people in the audience, we like to call ourselves diversity practitioners. And I love Oregon too, because we have a really strong group of them here. We all really lean on each other and depend on each other. So kind of in line with your story too, what else could diversity practitioners do to help you cheat more?
Yeah. I hear so many different great ideas, and having been on that side of the table on the public sector side, I think I can kind of relate to it. Well, I think the number one thing, if I'm one of the public partners, is knowing that done beats perfect. And that the timelines in the public sector oftentimes don't align very well with the timelines in the private sector. And so when I'm talking to folks, I always talk about, all right, that's a great 6-month, 12-month, 18-month idea. What can we do this week? What can we do this month with the stuff that we have? And so I remember I was part of a group of folks that got together when the shutdown started, and we were talking with City of Portland employees, and we were trying to think of big ideas to help small businesses. And I was like, hey, wait, before we go with the big ideas, like let's think about the small ideas of like where we're spending money today. And someone mentioned the thousands of people that work for the city that have these things called P cards, these small credit cards that they use to buy ancillary things. And it's like they spend a lot of money on food. And so as part of the group, I helped put together a list of Black-owned businesses that provide food and catering services, right? And so when those people were going and spending those P cards, now they had literally a list to go off of that they weren't required to do. But I think so often what holds back progress and the opportunity to meet amazing founders and find out the work that they're doing is you just don't know where to start, and you just don't know, what the first step moving forward is. And so in that case, it was putting together a list and saying these are all amazing people that do great work. You don't have to ask anybody about, spending $40 on lunch for the team. You just got to know, a new array of businesses that you can go to. And it led to some really cool conversations. I think sometimes some of the pushback was, oh, well, this is going to be more expensive. And oftentimes with the smaller businesses, no, it wasn't more expensive. It was the same price, or sometimes even easier, because of the way that business was able to pull things off.
I mean, you're so right that it's just something really simple sometimes that goes a long ways. A personal moment that is coming to mind again when you were talking is during the pandemic, I went to a local restaurant that I used to frequent when my office was in Salem, when I used to go in person to the office. And I thought of that business, and I thought that's just really sad, because it was all of us government employees flocking there for lunch, right? So right. I posted the most basic picture of my lunch, and within 2 days, it was my most liked post of my entire life. So my cute kids are nothing compared to rolls, apparently. So it was such a good takeaway. And I wanted to share that in line with what you were talking about, that people really underestimate the power of one simple act and how you can pay it forward. And I went and talked to that business the next week, and they were like, we had so many people come in and reshare your post, and we're selling out of our rolls. So I love your list idea. Something else that we're interested in, can you tell us a lot more about Pitch Black for those of us that maybe aren't as familiar?
Gotcha. Yeah, so Pitch Black's an event I started here in Portland going on 6 years ago now. And the initial idea was, some friends and I have a brew pub in Northeast Portland. We have an amazing ballroom space where we hold events. And I was like, I got a free space. I know a bunch of amazing Black founders that people don't seem to know are here. What would an event look like that celebrated them? And at the time, Shark Tank was really popular on TV. And so the general thesis was, what would Shark Tank look like without the sharks? And instead the crowd was the sharks. And so what I thought would be, 40, 50 people getting together in our space ended up being over 200 people in an event that ended up trending on Twitter. And the really shocking thing to me was how many people from other cities ended up reaching out to me after that first event. I thought it was something that would be uniquely good for Portland, given our demographics and change over time. But I definitely didn't expect to hear from people in Atlanta talking about, when can you bring an event out here? And so to go and be able to do events in Seattle and Austin and Philadelphia, like we have, has been just mind-boggling. And the most important point is, like, people want to be seen, especially in their own community, and they want to be recognized for what they're working on and what they want to work on. And I think the audience that attends the event is able to see the broad array of talent that we have within our community. We had somebody that used to work for NASA that pitched one time. We had somebody that had raised over $20 million for a business that pitched, and even people that came up with an idea that day that ended up pitching in front of the audience and winning. And so it's a pretty special and amazing spot that we look forward to getting back to.
I was gonna say, has it just been I bet it's just missing that communal space, right? It's how are you tackling keeping all of that together with this wonderful pandemic environment we're in?
Yeah, I think the nice thing, one of the positive externalities of the pandemic has been the things that matter are a lot fewer now, and the noise is kind of quieted. And so I find myself in a much more present place to be able to check in on folks. And I have a list of people that, I make sure that I text and just say, how are you doing? How are things going? And I do that monthly without stop. And so, maybe we don't have as many large events, but the times we are able to spend with people and really be able to connect, I think they mean a lot more. And so I do a lot of other smaller events where we're bringing together, a dozen or 2 dozen people here in community, because that's really important, because people are really going through it. And I think, as I mentioned in my talk, I was surprised to talk to so many business owners who, financially were doing really, really well, but personally were really struggling. And they felt like, really bad things just loomed around every corner. And so it's really important to not assume because someone's business is doing good that they're doing good personally. And so, everybody needs to feel part of a community and feel connected. And so it's important that we maintain and grow those relationships with folks.
I'm curious too, so because we are becoming such an interconnected world, and you mentioned like Atlanta and all of these areas that are definitely not the Oregon Trail, what do you see going forward? Do you see that as a plus for your mission to grow and expand? Like, is there going to be a pitch black Paris convention, or where do you see that playing into this interconnected world?
I think one of the amazing things that I've come to learn is the plight of a Black business here in Portland is not too much dissimilar than the plight of a Black business in Philadelphia. And the amazing thing that happens when we go and do other cities is we always take founders from Portland with us, right? Because one of the big goals that we want to do is be able to help people grow social capital, which I feel like is the most important capital to have when you're starting and growing a business. And so it's amazing to see the transition for someone who's crushing it here in Portland and to go to a completely new city and have people say, wow, I would love to be able to buy your product here. You should think about having a second location here. One of my favorite businesses in town, as everybody probably knows, is Dead Stock Coffee. And the owner, Ian Williams, is just one of my favorite people. He's got one location here, and he's done pitch black in other cities. And without a doubt, they're always like, all right, so when are you going to open a Dead Stock Coffee here in Philadelphia? He's actually in Philadelphia today talking about business. But it's amazing to see what sparks people's ideas, and they go from, thinking and planning big to thinking and planning really, really, really big. And I often say, like, it takes the same amount of energy to build a multi-million-dollar business as it does a $10,000 business. So might as well, go for the larger one. And so to be there and see people's reaction when they're experiencing getting love from another place that's foreign to them is awesome.
So I just want to take a second and remind everybody, we are so fortunate to have Stephen here with us. And this is your opportunity, even though I'm the only one fortunate enough to be on screen talking to you, which is like super awesome. So please drop in your questions to the Q&A and I will be asking Stephen. So we do have some more. So Catherine writes, you talked about the CARES Act and its huge effort to get business support out quickly. It was a great effort and helped a lot of people, but as you said, also left a lot of people of color behind. What can we take from that process so we can streamline support in the future and make sure it gets to the communities that need it most? Or sorry, that wasn't from Catherine. That was from Tracy. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. That's Tracy. That's an amazing question. I think part of what we now understand more so than ever is that a lot of the things that made COVID so hard, particularly for Black and Brown businesses, happened prior to COVID even being around here, right? So the CARES Act is a perfect example. The biggest program of the CARES Act, was the PPP loan program, right? $7 billion went into businesses around the state of Oregon through the PPP program. But we know that those dollars, by and large, missed Black and Latinx businesses. And that's mainly because those folks are the least likely ones to have strong relationships with their bank or their lender. And those folks were also the ones that were, highly stressed out with how their business was doing or not doing. And so if they would have had relationships with their bank or lender prior to COVID, imagine the kind of impact they would have been able to have when PPP became available, right? So if I'm a Black business and I know that the number of SBA loans is down 93% in the last 10 years, and then here comes this brand new SBA program that's supposed to help us with PPP, why would I ever think that that's going to be able to support me when for the last 10 years, I haven't been able to get access to SBA lending? And so what I hope comes out of that in the future is a real focus on trust building and how do we be represented and connected to community before there's a pandemic, before there's an emergency, and what would it look like to go and say, hey, we just like to spend time in community every month. We just like to come and check in and see how people are doing so that when something does happen, that relationship is already there. The first bank that I worked at back a long time ago was a US Bank branch in downtown Vancouver. And if you go into that branch and go into the back office area where the investment part of the bank is, you'll notice what looks like a bar back there, like a legit like drinking bar.
Okay.
And it literally was a bar that the bank had back in the 80s. And so
banking and beers. I love it.
Yeah. So, imagine how, this is how banking was done before. The branch manager was also the loan officer, was also the one that made decisions on everything. And so how smart of them to go and say, okay, during bank hours, we're doing all the banking stuff. And then I need to be able to connect with people. I need to be able to understand how they're doing before things get really bad. And so at this US Bank branch, they had a bar in there, and after hours, it would open up. And that's where the branch manager would connect with people and talk to them and learn about what was going on with their business. So before they even missed a loan payment, they were already in discussions and talking about, oh, wow, we lost our number one customer, right? And this is what it's going to do to us over the next 6 months. And they were able to problem solve. And so, in my mind, that's what a banker is to me. And when we've gotten away, I think, from relational banking, where the bankers are not only the people doing loans, but they're also the champions and the glue within the community. And we've gotten to more of a transactional place when it comes to banking, where it's like, well, just come and let me know what you need, and then maybe or maybe not, I'll give it to you, as opposed to playing more of a proactive role and being a steward in the community.
And along those lines, and you were kind of touching on this, so if you want to elaborate more, or you feel like you've already covered it, we have a question of how can the CARES Act go to other ethnic groups?
Yeah, so I want to be clear. So the CARES Act is the bigger federal program, and then the state of Oregon got an allocation of $2 billion from the CARES Act. And of that $2 billion allocation, $62 million ended up getting allocated to the Oregon CARES Fund, which is what I was part of volunteering for. A number of other communities of color and other underrepresented communities were able to take part in those funds. And as of today, per the CARES Act, the bigger CARES Act, those funds I believe are all distributed around the state of Oregon. But that's a really good question. I just wanted to make sure I pointed out the distinction between the CARES Act and the Oregon CARES Fund and where it's sat within the things.
Thank you for breaking that down, because I am definitely not a math person either. What did you call yourself when you started in economic?
I'm an economist, technically. That's what
economist. Okay, well, we're grateful to have your perspective on that as well, because math and digits, I'm sure I'm not the only one that is not my thing. That's why I'm here on the screen and not clicking on a calculator. So, Jill Betts asked, what databases do you recommend other than COVID or OWAMI lists, Mercatus, to access minority-owned businesses we'd like to use for business and personal purposes? That's a great question.
That is a really great one. So all the ones that you mentioned are really great databases. Another website I love is called I Love Black Food. And that's a ongoing spreadsheet and map of Black food businesses around the Portland area. Um, if you're people that like to go on Twitter, every year during Black History Month, I cover a different Black business each day of February around the state of Oregon. And so I think I meet so many Black and Brown businesses around the country via social media platforms. Um, here's the hard thing, Jill, about databases. The second you build them, they're out of date. And so I think the best that we can do is go and be strategic and concise around the communities that we want to support, and also be clear about what support looks like, right? Is that sharing information? Is that spending our money? All those things are great things. I think one of the biggest things that we can be doing to support minority-owned businesses is leaving reviews and sharing when we have big social media platforms. I think that's one of the things that people always think, oh, I just don't have the budget right now. People need reviews all the time. One of the recommendations I had for Mayor Wheeler was, take one day every week and highlight a Black-owned business on your Twitter account, right? Go and shop there yourself, and then say a little something about the business and how long it's been there. That's going to have a tremendous impact on that business's bottom line. And, how great is it, being a small business owner and, the mayor coming and, stopping by and shopping and buying your stuff and saying, hey, I see you. Those are all great lists that Jill mentioned. I know there's some work to be done around databases and just always getting more data. And part of that starts with, who's the organization that's going to do that. I know from the Oregon Cares Fund standpoint, we've got a list of over 600 businesses that we worked with. And we're looking at how we're going to be able to share that appropriately with the community so that people can further support those businesses.
That is all really helpful. And just my personal plug, like if you're going to post a picture, do your best, folks, to take a good picture. Like, every business wants to look good, right? Like your framing, and it's not that hard. iPhones make it pretty easy these days, right? We've got the technology now.
They do.
So I was reflecting back on your conversation earlier too. One thing that I thought was really poignant, because I had just heard this on a radio show the other day, when you said that 70% of Black businesses don't have a website. And I had just heard a conversation related to how marketing companies and businesses on the internet have kind of preyed on people before, especially small businesses, to charge a lot of money to make a website. And so this conversation on the radio was saying, to your point, a lot of businesses don't know that there are some really great platforms and really cost-effective services out there. So other things like that you want to share with the audience, maybe, that are other areas they could work on that aren't that huge of a lift for them financially?
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the digital divide there and websites. It's fascinating. Prior to COVID, for a lot of the businesses that I work with, trying to get them to have a website was really, really difficult. Well, guess what? Right after COVID shutdown happens, guess who's ready and willing to do a website? One of the amazing partners I got to work with here and around the country is an organization called Rebrand Cities, and they're based out of Detroit. The founder's name is Hodge Flemings, and he created this organization to go and help small businesses get websites, and not only get the websites, but understand what it means to have a website and understand the value, right? Because I think for a lot of small business owners, they say, well, I don't have time to have a website, versus understanding you don't have time not to have a website. And so with the effort that they do, they partner with Automatic WordPress, one of the largest website companies in the world, and they're able to do websites for less than $1,000. And typically depending on the deal you're working on with them, they can do them for $400 to $500. And are they crazy, crazy glamorous and Shopify APIs and all that stuff? No, but to go from not being on the internet to having a website that you can share with people is a game changer, as far as I'm concerned. And so whenever I'm talking to folks about who they can work with, as far as organizations that I know are doing great work around this, nationally, it's Rebrand Cities out of Detroit. And so
that is so good to know. And first off, like you said, that the pandemic has kind of helped with that. And hopefully that continues. And so we still have a few more minutes with Stephen here, you guys. So this is your chance, because otherwise Cody's going to start asking just some fun questions, which I know no one will disagree with. But we still have another good topic-related question for you, Stephen, okay? Have you thought of the mentoring opportunity for community successful business to volunteer to mentor a Black small business or reach out to many business development agents?
I'm gonna take that question probably the wrong direction. But thank you, Jen. I think this gets into my point around storytelling a little bit, and I think mentoring is great. At the same time that we're mentoring folks that are upstream, we have to be telling the stories of the businesses that are also downstream, so that if I'm a business owner, I can see the whole continuum. Because I think often, a lot of us will be familiar with the phrase, over mentored and under sponsored. And so, no one does this by themselves. And I have some amazing mentors that in my life that help me get answers to the questions that I have, but also help me ask the questions that I don't even know to ask. And so having that group of people around you is really, really, really important. I think part of this is about just getting the stories out there and getting the numbers out there. It's amazing when people hear that there's 6,000 Black businesses in Oregon. They're like, oh crap! Like I only know 2. Like I need to get my stuff together. But literally, if they didn't know that, they're like, well, I know 2, so I'm good. Like I'm doing some things. And so that perspective is so important. And then when you are mentoring someone, help understand and be directed towards what kind of impact and outcomes you want to be able to have happen. For me, I love talking people out of venture capital. I think it's one of my superpowers, where I meet with a business and they're dead set on raising money, and then I help them find a path to not have to do that, and how to really focus on customers and getting product market fit. And it's important to have people around you that can help you navigate the things that you want to do, but also the things that may not be on your radar as well.
So circling back a little bit to Cheat Day and thinking about public agencies again, could you say a little more about how public agencies can provide cheat days or options for small businesses? Any thoughts on how to implement those in risk-averse situations, laws, rule-driven organizations?
Yeah. This is one that, boy, I'm all too familiar with, working at the city and the very real legal barriers for things around procurement. Cheat days are really I think the cheat code to gaining trust and relationships within the small business community. And so if I'm at a public sector organization, I want to be able to go and say, hey, whatever the dollar amount is, it can't be too small, right? But it's a huge difference to go and be able to tell a community, hey, we're going to take X amount of dollars and it's only going to be available to you, right? And that can be based on a geography. And again, these are not requirements, but this is where you're setting your emphasis, right? So I'm not saying go and say, we're only going to support Black businesses, because that would be against the law. But what I am saying is, when it comes to your promotions and where you're allocating your time and resources as far as building relationships, you can over accentuate on doing that with Black businesses. I think, ways to do that is, instead of a big long RFP that most likely people won't apply to because they don't know how to apply to RFPs. And if they do know how to apply, they probably are going to think the people that have always won them are going to get them anyway. Do something small. So go and look at your procurement policies and say, okay, what's the dollar amount where I don't have to talk to anybody? I don't have to do a solicitation. It doesn't have to go to city council. Like, let's start with that dollar amount. And what can we do around that dollar amount that moves us forward from where we're at today? And so that P card situation of, hey, everyone's got these credit cards that they're using. We know by and large, we probably don't have a formal way for them being able to, connect and spend those dollars with minority-owned businesses. Let's put something small in place that's easy and timely, and then build on that from there. I think once you start engaging with the community and getting those small wins, you're going to learn a lot more stuff, and you're going to see more businesses come out of the woodwork that maybe you didn't know were there even before.
Thank you for that. It's really helpful.
Yeah.
I know being a public employee myself, it is a struggle. And I also really value that you came from the public sector and can transfer and share that knowledge. I think that's an invaluable thing to bring to the table in the line of work that you're doing. And it really helps us all move the conversation because we can relate and understand. Going back to what else you were talking about when you started of taking this trip around the state with COVID.
Yeah.
I too did the same thing. So I fulfilled my dream was to have a vintage trailer that we kind of redid. I didn't totally flip it. I'm not that skilled. I was fancy. It's got a really cute name too. I named it Junior Mint.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
It's really tiny. So we took it around the state too. And I used to work, so similar to you, I used to work at the county level in a small rural county that I will not name. So I, through working with the counties, and then I went on to go to the state. And I often tell people one of the greatest joys I've gotten out of working at the state level is getting to go to a lot of the counties and see Oregon is so diverse, crazy diverse. People, you can be at the beach in the morning and in the desert within the evening and still just be in Oregon. And that to me is insane. And there were a few small towns that my kids and I stopped in, and it was interesting, very interesting. And so I would love to hear more on what you took away from your experience of touring Oregon, and maybe because I think that those of us in the metropolitan areas often forget that the rural community in Oregon is so different. So what other thoughts do you have on that?
Yeah, man, I have so many thoughts. Being someone who grew up here and someone who went to college in Polk County, 20 miles outside of Salem, I think it was Isaiah Ryder that said it back in the 90s, like you leave Portland and go out 60 miles and you're in a very different place. And that's very true. And so I think for me, I'm generally guarded. I'm a 6'1", 240-pound Black man, just, going wherever I want to go. And so, it leads me to be guarded, but also curious. And my experiences, going to college at Western Oregon in Monmouth, a place that's only got 2,000 people when school's not in, was happily surprising most of the time, right? People may not have had experience with a lot of people of color, but when you were there, they were actually happy that you were there. And some of the best experiences that I've ever had have been in some really, really small towns around Oregon. This summer, I got a chance to go on a rafting trip to Maupin, Oregon, right next to the Warm Springs Reservation. And you're right, like the sites that we have in the state are absolutely amazing and jaw-dropping. And, I think that's one of the things that we have to realize as employers is that that's one of the reasons why people come here and live here, is that it doesn't look like the middle of America where most of the things are flat. And we do have this diverse array of ecosystems. I think one of the things that I'm hopeful for is that, companies can continue to lean in on that kind of stuff. We're 100% remote company where, yeah, we have an office here in Portland, but if you got a rafting trip in Maupin and they've got Wi-Fi there, like feel free to stay the week in Maupin and, work during the day and raft in the afternoon around lunchtime, whatever. I think that that's good for business. And I think that's also good for the state. Um, and the diversity that's happening in our state is happily happening all over the state, right? It's not just in Portland. I went to Aloha High School out on the west side, and when I was a senior at Aloha, we had about 2,000 students, and only 4 of them were Black or Latinx. 4 out of 2,000. And I go back and I volunteer at that school today, and it's a majority minority school. It's 40% Latino. There's a lot of kids that look like me there. And, I think that's something that we forget about when we're talking a lot about Northeast Portland and how, there's less Black people here than there was before. We forget that in totality, we have a lot more Black people in the Portland metro area than we've ever had. And it's good that they're not all required by law or, illegal racist statutes in real estate to live in Northeast Portland. But that also means that these cultures are colliding, and so we're seeing the stuff play out in Newburgh right now with the school board and talking about Black Lives Matter and the Pride flag, and it's been heartening to see the way the community there in Newburgh is responding. Right, that wouldn't happen when I was in high school. There would have been no conversations, nothing would have been in the newspaper, and so that in and of itself, it's a really hard situation, but I'm happy to see how the community is responding in whole.
Well, Stephen, we are at the end of our time, and I am sure you're really relieved that you didn't get to hear all the rest of my questions.
No tough questions. I was waiting for
I was just gonna say
thing that's happened.
I got one.
Oh,
that please. I have learned can open up a can of worms. So maybe it's good that people are only in the chat because this might start a brawl. But right, close. Do you dip your ketchup in anything besides, or dip your French fries in anything besides ketchup? Ooh. I have learned this is like a really contentious question to bring up.
So I have to remind people of my Puerto Rican upbringing. So in my house, we had banana ketchup. We did not have normal ketchup.
Wow.
So I didn't grow up dipping my fry into regular ketchup. It was always into banana ketchup. And so, context is important. So that's the way I would answer that one.
Good answer. For those of us, again, in the room that are maybe 80s, 90s kid, remember that weird time when Heinz made green ketchup?
Yes, that was a bad idea.
Really weird. So when you're saying context, like I think this is the takeaway is like, yeah, ketchup, but not green ketchup or banana ketchup. So who knew there would be lots of different ketchups. So
there you go.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. We are so fortunate. You are such an inspiration to this community as a whole. I want to encourage everybody to check out all of your fantastic work. Pitch in how they can to Pitch Black, right? That's the point, pitch in, right? So everybody go check Stephen out. And I am going to bet we will see you on How I Built This podcast someday. I think you can do it, Stephen.
We shall see. Awesome. I appreciate it. And thank you for all of the amazing work that BDI is doing, you and the board. It's an amazing organization. You guys really provide a lot of value to the community. Again, I'm honored to play a small piece in the great work that you're doing, bringing community together.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much. And everybody, I am going to transition us out. So if you'll stay with me here just for a few more minutes so I can share Business Diversity Institute's extreme gratitude for everybody this week. You guys that have participated in being a fantastic audience, and your continued support by showing up, your dedication to growing your diversity practitioner learnings, as well as being small business leaders in the community. This is what we're here for. We love this work. I know you've probably heard Tracy mention by now that we are an all-volunteer board. So I want to thank all of our fantastic board members. I am the vice chair of BDI. Tracy is the chair. And together, her and I now have put our heads together twice during the pandemic to figure out how we bring this to you virtually. And we have had some amazing board members that I want to make sure you all go to our app, check out who our board members are, and give them some thanks and support them and their work too. But I also want to say, if you are interested in joining the board as well, we have a lot of opportunities. We also have friends of the board opportunities, so check out our website. Don't forget to catch some of our other events. Breakthrough Breakfast, our Recharge next spring. We also have some new programming that I think we'll be rolling out very soon for diversity practitioners, so stay tuned. To all of our sponsors that are still with us today, thank you so much. We couldn't do this without you. You continue to answer the call to support BDI and provide these great opportunities like Stephen and Venki, who you heard from earlier, and Leanna, and hearing all of these business leaders' stories, bringing in Kinesis so they can share with us their learnings to help you profit and grow. These are all due in part because of sponsorship. So thank you all so much. So I want to say, I hope you have engaged. I hope you have elevated, and I hope beyond everything else that you feel empowered. So thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next BDI event. Take care, everyone.